Welcome to Office Hours Episode 8. I'm your host, Davis Hunt, Editor-in-Chief of the Pamphleteer. We got a good show ahead of us today. I've got Andrew Beck of Beck and Stone. Andrew actually designed the logo that you see up there. I don't know which way my hand points on this stream, but it's up there. The P, that way. And we get a lot of compliments on the design of our website. I think that people underrate the value of design, especially in more conservative right-wing spheres, and it's something that we chose not to nix on. So anyway, I talk to him later. I do my normal rundown of everything that happened in the Pamphleteer over the past week, or give some highlights. So we're going to go through that here in a second. But first, if you're not familiar with the Pamphleteer, we send out daily newsletters every afternoon around lunchtime about Nashville business, arts, and politics. You can sign up at our website, pamphleteer.co, and it's a great source of information, even if you don't necessarily agree with everything that we have to say. Depending on your political disposition, I imagine that there's probably something you'll find to disagree with us about, and that's fine. That's kind of part of this whole deal. But we do compile a nice event calendar. We put together curated headlines from around town. One thing that we do cover as well is real estate development. We're going to talk about that here in the rundown. So let's, Geneva, let's pull up that slideshow. So, they've finally decided on a developer for the first phase of the East Bank development. You're looking at a render of it here. It's Fallon Company, which is headquartered out of Boston. And what you're looking at here, if you're not familiar, that's the Korean Vet Bridge there on your right, and the pedestrian bridge that we're all familiar with that typically leads over to Nissan Stadium there on the left side, the bridge on the left side. And they're calling this they're calling this path that goes from the pedestrian bridge down through those buildings, that illuminated passage there, the Music City Mile. It's going to be full of retail and all kinds of things. Right now, if you're familiar, this is either a parking lot or Nissan Stadium. It's a pretty characterless place. To the right, where they have all these other buildings rendered out, that's just an industrial wasteland, basically. There's nothing over there worth visiting. There's no restaurants. There's apartments deep in that area, but for the most part, no one spends any time over here unless you're going to the Titans game. There used to be a very good German restaurant. I think it was called the Hofbrau. I can't remember. It's been a while since it was there, but that was over there. But it was the Hofbrau, Nissan Stadium, and I guess Topgolf is technically over there now. This is totally going to remake the East Bank into this destination spot, which I find actually pretty interesting. So here we see, this is on the pedestrian bridge, walking over the pedestrian bridge. The first thing you see is this building here. And I think they're talking about putting 1,000 affordable units in this building for low and middle income people. I can't really, it's hard to verbalize how insane it is to put affordable units for low and income people in what is looking like one of the more desirable parts of town very shortly. We tried this in the Gulch, and if you lived in town, you probably knew someone who took advantage of that, made up some entity or some other such thing, and bought an apartment for very cheap. I knew a lot of people that were in school at the time that got cheap apartments, affordable housing apartments at the Icon in the Gulch. I imagine something similar will play out here. I can't say for sure, though. Who knows? Anyway, they're going to have 1,000 affordable units there. That's not even part of it. So we're walking down the pedestrian bridge. The next view is down the Miracle Mile, or the Music City Mile. This is going to be full of retail. I'm trying to think of an analog. Maybe if you've been to the Braves, the new Braves Stadium, this does seem similar to that. Albeit the Braves Stadium is in Cobb County. It's apart from the rest of the city, so it's kind of its own development. What's unique about the Titans Stadium and this whole development is that it's connected directly to downtown. But you have bars, stores, restaurants, etc. And then you come out into this kind of courtyard area, and there you see the Titans Stadium on your left and this giant Jumbotron in a kind of something of a courtyard. Like if we go back to the first slide, you can see the glowing blue screen up there towards the top of the screen, and the courtyard's there, and you can see the snaking of the Music City Mile. I doubt it's actually a mile. I'm sure that's just kind of a colloquial term they're going to use to give it character. But yeah, so that's what we have to look forward to on the East Bank. Another interesting piece of development news, Centennial Park is getting a $10 million makeover. They're adding a cafe, and they're adding this pavilion. It's all going to happen on the Park Plaza entrance of the park, which is by the old HCA headquarters. So if you're going down by Centennial Sportsplex or on the west side past the dog park, snaking around past the volleyball courts, and you see the Parthenon on your right, it'll go on that side street that runs to the north side of the park. They're adding this pavilion. They're adding they're adding a cafe. Two of the more interesting, development news that have come out this week. The East Bank is pretty substantial. Centennial Park could use a facelift. It's a beautiful park. It's a great park. It's the best park. They could perhaps upgrade it with features like this. So that's what they seem to be doing. Next up, last week, Bloomberg published this article on the hostile takeover of blue cities by red states. GOP legislators are increasingly imposing their economic and cultural priorities on left-leaning municipalities like Nashville. So they highlight Nashville as an example of states getting involved in blue cities. And as you would imagine, it's a very sympathetic portrait for the city. There's not really an interrogation of why the cities would do this, except to say that it's motivated by some vague Trumpist tendency or some other such thing. Like John Cooper's quote, which is in the article, the current mayor of Nashville, is just on point. Here's what he says. Nashville is cool, but if that's being threatened, then it threatens our status as a creative economy. Does a software engineer from California want to come to Nashville? Sorry, I'm stuffed up a little bit. That seems hostile to diversity and creative expression, or dangerous. It's not really clear what he means by dangerous. I don't think anyone's ever described Nashville as generally dangerous unless you're hanging out in the north part of town. But that's not where John Cooper hangs out, and that's not where any of the action, so to speak, is taking place. But this idea of cool is that the uncool beliefs of the General Assembly are going to scare people away. We saw this happen back in 2021 when the state legislature was pondering these various laws around restricting. There was the bathroom bill. There was, I think they had kind of floated out the idea of doing the drag bill, but there were some bills that were addressing the trans phenomenon in the state, and a big concern from people like John Cooper and a bunch of other talking heads in town was that this legislation would scare away people like Oracle. Sure enough, it did not. Oracle is still planning on building their campus on the East Bank. I think it's part of a later phase, but Amazon has still come to the city. Many other businesses have moved to the city, even in spite of these supposedly draconian laws that the state has passed. The general conceit of the article is that it is the fault of Trump in some way to have created this dynamic. There's no investigation of whether the city is being governed well. I'll get to that in a second. But it's blaming the state wanting to take revenge on the city for turning down the Republican National Convention last year. And that's it. That's what they reduce it to. It's the same binary that you see in any of the wars that are talked about in mainstream media, whether it be Ukraine, Russia, or whatever. It's very simple. It's not anything more sophisticated than good guy here, bad guy here. Same dynamic you're seeing playing out here. Tennessee State Legislature, Tennessee State Republicans, bad guys. Democrats in Nashville, good guys. No further examination of what might have led to this. I've talked about this in other spaces. We're going to focus on one particular aspect of it today, which is the financial state of the city. I'm going to do it in a cool and sexy way, though, so it's not going to be boring. Don't worry about that. Here's Jim Cooper, former 5th Congressional Congressman, commenting on this change in dynamic, this Trumpian conceit that has infected the state's politics. You see it here every day, the way Trump has unleashed a sort of in-your-face style. My plumber, who knows exactly who I am, wears a fuck Joe Biden hat when he comes to fix the sink. It's a really interesting quote, and I think it's worthy of a lot of investigation. So he's talking about his plumber wearing a fuck Joe Biden hat or a Let's Go Brandon hat. It's probably a Let's Go Brandon hat. I don't think I've ever seen anyone wear a fuck Joe Biden hat, ever. I've seen lots of Let's Go Brandon hats. I bet it's a Let's Go Brandon hat, and he's just translating. In any event, he blames this hostile attitude on Trump. It's easy to blame abstractions, and I'm reading from what I wrote on Thursday. It's easy to blame abstractions like Donald Trump's political rhetoric. His brash styles undoubtedly reshape the Republican Party, but what remains unexplored by those who have a problem with it is why this rhetoric resonates in the first place. Are Nashville liberals willing to concede that conservative concern for the city's future is justified, or will they continue to brush off concerns as expressions of MAGA extremism? So are my concerns about the city or my ideas that might be contrary to the prevailing establishment in the city an expression of MAGA extremism? I think that I might get lumped into that camp, whether I want to or not. I think that would be inaccurate, by the way. The standard line from City Brass is that nothing is as bad as you think it is. The mantra is repeated anytime someone complains about crime. It's not as bad. It's not that bad, you coward. Public education, it's getting better. It just needs more money. Or the city's financial situation. What services could you do without taxpayer? Nashville is in horrible fiscal health. It is, I'm going to fast forward to this slide here. It is 68 out of 75 metropolitan areas in the U.S. in terms of its fiscal health. This is done by Truth in Accounting. We need $4 billion to pay off our bills. That's a $20,000 tax burden. That's a $20,000 burden per taxpayer. The financial grade D, I mean, whatever. We're bad. We're not doing good. The city is not managing its finances well. That's an objective fact. An objective fact. It's not up for dispute. Here's like here are their assets, bills accumulated. I don't think that's important. The point is that if the city's in this financial hotspot, if some crisis or some other such thing emerged, then it would put the city in a hot spot. A good example of this is what's happened recently in New York City. And let's not get into why it's happened, but Eric Adams spoke on it recently.
A problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
Mayor Eric Adams escalating his frustration during a town hall meeting, revealing new fears as tens of thousands of asylum seekers continue to arrive in New York City.
110,000 migrants. We have to feed, clothe, house, educate the children, wash their laundry sheets, give them everything they need, health care. Month after month, I stood up and I said, this is going to come to a neighborhood near you.
All right, that's good, Geneva.
Well, we're here.
So what we see there is Mayor Adams, New York City is a sanctuary city, so they have an obligation to look after the migrants. I don't know if you've kept up with this stuff, but Florida and Texas have been busing migrants into sanctuary cities away from their ports of entry. And this has created a crisis in New York because they're, as he said, obligated to pay for their shelter, their health care, etc. And this just came out 2 days ago. New York NYPD to cut overtime as Big Apple feels budget pinch of migrant crisis, with city departments being told to slash budgets to fund shelters. This is the kind of situation that you wonder if a city in positive financial health let's set aside the whole idea of a sanctuary city here. Let's just assume New York has committed to it. They're willing to bear the financial burden of it. We can find another analogy for Nashville, but for now, let's just think about the health of a city. If a city is seriously in debt, they're not able to take on exigencies like this. And New York is clearly suffering from this, and there's been nothing that anyone in the city brass has shown us that they would be willing to weather a similar situation, whatever it may be, without putting us in a further compromised financial situation. Freddie's done, like, now to kind of tie this into the mayor's race, because this is really what this is all about. Alice Raleigh has spoke extensively about our financial issues. Freddie has basically mentioned nothing, indicating that he'll probably raise taxes and touting the city's AAA bond rating, which is basically an indication that they're willing to raise taxes and that taxpayers will tolerate it, and not talked about anything like spending issues. This is like an old Republican, boring platform issue that no one cares about, right? I have a hard time caring about it, just to be honest with you. But it is a reality that will at some point come to bite the city in the ass, and it prevents it from taking action on stuff that it might be able to do to actually improve the lives of its citizens if it's constantly having to worry about where to find money. And low taxes is one of the reasons that people move here. Art Laffer, famously, Reagan's economic advisor, famously moved to this city and this state for its low taxes. So, anyway, one thing that Freddie did do recently was following the George Floyd, the Summer of Floyd as they call it, or yeah, I think that they call it that. It's not just me. Everyone calls it that. Is he advocated for a $7 million reduction in M&T PD's budget to kind of balance out this property tax increase. Freddie is a very savvy politician, and it's clear what he was trying to do here. He was trying to appease two sides. He wanted to appear to be in favor of reducing the 34% increased property tax, which was voted into law during COVID. Probably the worst time to ever vote in a property tax increase I could think of, when everyone's out of work and everything's shut down. And reducing the budget of the Metro Nashville Police Department. There's a story in the Tennessee Lookout from around that time where they interview O'Connell before he had declared for his mayorship, and he talks about his reaction to the George Floyd thing and how he was immediately kind of drawn into this promotion of community oversight boards and all this kind of thing, which is kind of an indication of his constitution. Perhaps it's not guaranteed that were a stressful situation to emerge, could we trust that Freddie O'Connell would keep his priorities straight and not fall for a false narrative like the George Floyd thing, which was clearly I don't have time to get into this, and if you are watching this and disagree with me, maybe you can message me and we'll talk about it, or I'll do a post on it. But this is well documented in a lot of places. The whole hysteria following the George Floyd murder was very overblown. Was it even a murder? It's hard to say. So if a guy is able to be sucked into media narratives like that and translate that into policy, it makes me a little uneasy, I'll say. So there's the financial health, as I just discussed. And I'll cap this off because tomorrow's election day, and we endorsed Alice Raleigh for mayor. And Freddie, as I've tried to make clear over the past couple of months, has represented himself effectively as this kind of quasi-outsider grassroots candidate. What we've learned in the past couple of days after his financial disclosures is that 1 in 4 of his campaign dollars came from LLCs or PACs, which indicates that his grassroots support is probably a little, he clearly has support, but you cannot discount the institutional support he has from the so-called billionaires that he rails against. O'Connell's been given the pass on everything. There has been very little scrutinizing done of his past behavior, whether any of what he says is true about his past record on the Metro Council. There are some votes that people have challenged about him, Yes, he didn't vote he decided not to vote when the vote came up for whether or not to approve the Republican National Convention at the Convention Center. That was a vote clearly that he took with an eye on the mayor's office. But on Twitter, he'd railed against the RNC after, I can't remember what was the whole thing that happened that led up to the RNC and them declining it. Oh my gosh. The news is just, you just forget everything. There was some incident that resulted in him, it might have been the Trump fallout, him denying the election. I think that's probably what it was. January 6th, etc. They didn't want to welcome in the January 6th presidents. I guarantee that's what it was. He still voiced opposition to it, even though he didn't translate into a vote. That was probably with the understanding that a progressive mayor still is not going to play well in the city. He's done a very good job of masking himself as a moderate, and has been able to do that because no one in town is willing to question him except for us. And, some state-level organizations, but we're the only city-level publication that's even thought to criticize him or look into whether he is who he says he is. And it's very hard to make the case that Freddie is dangerous because he's not necessarily dangerous, but he has made a commitment to continue on the same path that the city has been on for the past 10 years. And there was the Vanderbilt poll in spring of 2022, which asked, do you think the city is on the right direction? The majority of people said no. And Freddie's run his whole campaign on continuing on that path. So it's kind of mystifying why people are so crazy about him. O'Connell continues, I'm reading from what I wrote this morning now. O'Connell continues to sit comfortably in the lead as his campaign dribbles out drab talking points and incoherent memes to an arrogant, naive base that laps them up like dogs. Yeah, I was a little upset this morning, not gonna lie. The general attitude towards O'Connell is best captured by a Nashville scene profile subtitled, "The longtime council member is everything, everywhere, all at once." Everything, everywhere, all at once. That sounds like we're talking about a god, not a mortal mayoral candidate. I mean, it's a reference to the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I think won Best Picture last year. But its religious undertones are clear. And it's very self-evident that Freddie, a candidate like this messianic candidate like Freddie O'Connell, can only exist in a secular, liberal world without God, where they make politics their God and this reform of the city and the extension of bus lines and all sorts of kind of arcane spells that you can cast on the land to make the people happy and appease them. And here we have Freddie O'Connell, prophet, priest, and king. He's different from other politicians. He doesn't trade donations for favors. There was a piece 2 days ago where Freddie was asked about these donations from, the PACs and LLCs and this kind of thing, when he's kind of represented himself as a mayor of the people. And his response to that was, well, people understand that when they give me money, that doesn't guarantee them access. Very easy to not deny that. I mean, very easy. There's not really a way that you could really probe that question except to say, okay, I just don't trust you. And that's my response. I don't trust that. It doesn't pass the smell test. I don't believe that someone giving him money is not doing so with the understanding that they'll get a favor later. That violates the basic law of politics. We even saw Bernie Sanders violate this law, and he was the messiah of the Democratic Party for a while. He doesn't even have new plans. If you have a concern, he will listen to you and make you feel heard. He will build a bus line through the dark valley of billionaires and bachelorettes. See the light, vote for Freddie O'Connell, repent. The likely reality of O'Connell's tenure is unfortunately much more drab than him being this messianic character. I think he'll probably soon find himself moonlighting as a pundit on MSNBC, railing against the GOP supermajority in the state, which will keep an eye on his pending initiatives and continue its effort to wrangle control of the city, even despite his best efforts. Freddie is probably the worst candidate that we could elect to mend relationships between the city and the state. And I think that about captures it. I've said so much on Freddie O'Connell. I'm tired of talking about him. Honestly, it seems inevitable that he'll get elected tomorrow. There needs to be a massive turnout on behalf of Alice Raleigh if she's going to have any chance. But I will still put this up. We endorsed Alice Raleigh. I am voting for Alice Raleigh tomorrow. I think that she is best equipped to deal with the crucial issues in the city, such as failing education system, an understaffed police department, and, as I mentioned, the city's financial health. These are all problems that Freddie O'Connell has papered over and given not the attention that they deserve. And in my opinion, they are the fundamental problems that the city faces, and you cannot construct a robust, world-class city without nailing those things. And Alice is the only candidate that's spoken to them, and that's why I'm voting for her. All right. So, now that that's done, next up, I talked to Andrew Beck. Andrew Beck runs Beck & Stone. As I said earlier, Beck & Stone designed our website. They do amazing work. We kind of go through why design is important and a bunch of peripheral questions around that. And so, yeah, we'll cue that up now and enjoy. I recorded it yesterday. So, sitting here with Andrew Beck, founding partner of Beck & Stone. Beck & Stone is a design consultancy of sorts. They designed the Pamphleteer's website for all of you that have complimented our design and our iconography and the logo and everything. That is the work of Beck & Stone. They do amazing work. They've worked with a variety of clients. I'll let Andrew name some of those. New Criterion. Right, Andrew? Can I see you down there nodding? Let's bring them up. New Criterion. Who are some of the other groups that y'all have worked with?
Yeah, way back in the day, we designed the First Things website, but the New Criterion, of course, was not designed by us as the print magazine, but the website and the digital presence was. We kind of made our mark on the world by taking these kind of aging publications that are very niche. And often very conservative, and sort of breathing more life into them by making them into, digital brands. And so, of course, that's a website, but that's also, email, social media, sort of building out a full visual identity for them. That was before kind of limited to just their print collateral.
Yeah, like when you're dealing with when you're dealing with a legacy brand like that, how difficult is it to translate it into, its digital form?
Yeah, harder than it seems, because it's not an issue of copying and pasting, but you also can't just throw everything out. With working with the New Criterion, for instance, they have this 40-something-year-old magazine where everything has stayed the same. For the most part, for its entire existence. They said, well, it was just designed to be perfect. When it was first designed, it was Matthew Carter, who was a typographer, but also a graphic designer. So he designed a typeface called Galliard, which you see everywhere, but also fonts like Verdana, which was one of those web-safe fonts, if you recall. He designed a couple of those. So yeah, he did the design for them 40 years ago, and they've just kept it ever since. And so when this idea came across them, where they said we have to make this into a digital brand, we need a website that is going to reflect the magazine, but be more about like the spirit rather than the letter. It's picking up on the minutia. It's looking at details and having the taste and having the self-awareness and I guess the humility enough to realize that something that someone else has done before you really cannot be improved upon. There are certain things that you can iterate, there are certain things that you can optimize, and there are certain things that you can introduce. But ultimately, the foundation of these very tried and true objects really don't need some
innovation
to come around and innovate on it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you say that, because we were just talking about some old legacy brands who have done that, and I'm going to reserve that for later in the conversation. But one thing generally that people associate with uh, publications or brands on the right, conservative brands, etc. And the saying is like, what the worse design the website is, the more likely it is to be right wing. I honestly find that description fascinating, and I would love to hear your assessment of why that is.
Well, I mean, one, I've kind of built a company the last 9 years pushing against that premise.
Yes,
And
yeah, yeah.
and look, like the design. By the way, I'm getting over some kind of cold. I mean, honestly, it's probably the Rona. Just don't tell anybody that. Like,
Well, we're remote, so
you just have to deal with everything. You got the flu to deal with. You got colds to deal with. Now you got Ronas to deal with. There's too many things to deal with. Anyway, so yeah. If you just see me drinking lots of liquids, that's why. So I've built a company pushing back on that premise that like the people who lift up Roger Scruton and talk of beauty don't deserve beautiful things, don't deserve beautiful things on the internet, things on people's screens. Now, for a while, this was considered to be, and this, I mean, the internet was the domain of libs and weirdos. And so conservatives famously, and I always bring this up, that conservatism is an intellectual movement. It's really a movement of the elites that has sort of bled out through the popular culture, so that more people identify with it, but they are not truly like conservative in the sense of lineage. And so the conservative movement was really an elite movement, and they just did not look elite. And so, when we say things, for instance, like you work on conservative brands, I mean, I'm not doing anything for
TPAC.
Yeah, TPAC for or TPUSA, CPAC. There's like a whole side of that world that, like we've been more with like the intellectual conservatives, the dreaded elites. And then yet it was easy for people on the left to dismiss them as illegitimate, as amateurish, because they looked like it. One of my famous or one of the famous criticisms of me when I was just going over the work that we were doing and brought up the Claremont Institute, and a liberal friend of mine who I don't have anything against him, but he said, "You are legitimizing dangerous ideas." And what do you mean by this? And he had a hard time describing what I was doing. You're making them look like real, like serious. And I'm like, so by graphic design, I am legitimizing dangerous ideas. Yes. And it's because making something like the Claremont Review of Books, making the American mind and these various publications look good. And it isn't so much look good as in they are ostentatious or original. They just look legitimate. They just have taste.
Yeah.
They just have their own unique identity. And that then carries the message out. That is what the other side of these, culture war sees as exclusively their domain. And we just simply ceded it to them for all those years. So, of course, me kind of coming from, Madison Avenue, Silicon Alley scene of the late 2000s, early 2010s, I'm just like, well, why? I'm going to just treat these brands like I would treat any Condé Nast brand that I worked on. And so that's just simply what people, I think, now come to us for. So the tides have changed. There are certain sensitivities. Like if you're going to use Gotham, I'm sorry, you're just going to look like a lib because that's Obama's font. And so like no conservative can seriously use like all caps, nicely spaced out Gotham. It's just not going to fly. But yeah,
who was
otherwise
your
it's
first?
just No, sorry.
Who was
go
your
ahead.
sorry? You were chopping up there. Who was your first, the maybe figure or artist or graphic designer that first made you realize the power of design?
Well,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's like a very easy example, but it's Paul Rand in that he could get Steve Jobs. He goes in and Steve Jobs tells this story. He says that he asked Paul Rand for options to design the Apple logo, and this is like the first like real logo. They had that corny one. Which like looking back on it now, it's actually kind of based. It's the
I've got it
there we
pulled
go.
up.
Right, like
The
that.
the Newton.
Newton, I mean, looking back on it now, you're like, that's pretty sick. I like it. But when Steve Jobs realized, like, okay, we have to be like a corporate brand, and we can't have this sort of like, Episcopal shield looking thing that's out of like a storybook. He goes to Paul Rand, who is older, and had quite a bit of graphic identities under his belt, and it's well like so am I going to get options? And then he's like, no, you're not. Like, you will tell me your problem, I will give you the solution, and you will pay me money, and if you don't like it, then that's on you, or you can go F yourself, or whatever he told Steve Jobs. And so Steve Jobs, of course, is like, I mean, we all know the reputation of this guy, but he kind of like respects.
He paid out like way more than any other person in tech at the time would have paid for
Yeah.
Paul Rand, and it was
Yeah.
probably seen as insane and like a waste of money.
Sure. Well, and like people always get these stories of like, oh, the office manager or something designed the Nike swoosh logo in a competition, and that's what we should do now, so we could have the Nike logo. And it's like, actually, no. For the most part, you have to really pay people who make it their business to get into your business and want you to look better than even maybe you yourself want to look. And that's what Paul Rand did. And he came back with the Apple logo. And
Which is the same. It's been unchanged since then.
Yeah.
I mean,
they lost the stripes, but that's it.
Yeah.
That's like truly like the perfection that comes from something that is that solid. And you can like have something, I mean, literally from the 70s that is like still excellent now.
It still looks fresh. I mean,
Yeah.
it still looks fresh.
So like that story, and also just that example of someone who's saying, I'm going to get so into your head, and like I'm going to tackle even a very difficult client. I'm going to take this guy on because I believe that he's he's a great man, and I'm going to make something that's going to be eternal, something that's going to stand the test of time, and that like if somebody changes it, it will be upon their heads, but it won't be upon my head that like someone has to create something that needs to be iterated on at its core.
So, like the fundamental role of the designer is the way you described it. Like Paul Rand, it's funny that you say Paul Rand because my like first understanding of the value of design came through Steve Jobs, and I kind of like privileged his preference of that in building his business.
Many
as
people
like
did, yeah.
as the pioneer. That was the decision that set Apple on the path that it's on, was his privileging of design. But like, so a designer is a bit like a branding shrink for a brand. I don't like the term shrink, and I don't like shrinks, but for better or worse, the job of the designer is to see what the person working in and around the business does not see about it, and to bring out characteristics of it that present it to another audience. Because I know from working on, for example, the Pamphleteer, as much as people working in or on a business can will act like they know, you don't honestly know how your business or how yourself is perceived. And I do think that that's for the best, to be honest. I think it's good to remain ignorant on that to some extent. And if you ever need opinions on that, you should bring in people to help you understand that, more so than you should be consciously aware of that, because I think that hinders you to some extent. But hey, I think you're muted. Oh, hold on, I got you.
Okay, here it is. No, it's like somebody who doesn't watch their own films, who's like an actor and like doesn't watch their own films. If you are like inside the house at a company and it's your thing, it's almost better if you, to some degree, tune out
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
certain things so that you can act more naturally, and then let other people sort of present you in the best light and adapt to you. And I mean that's something I think that's good advice for branding, but it's also just good advice for management. I've had times where people, oh, Andrew Beck was difficult to work with. This is people that like worked for me, and I can remember I was just feeling down about this. I'm just like the person this doesn't work well with me. And I was talking to my business partner, and so Austin was just like, well, then that's their problem. This is this is your business. They either conform to you or they could get out. And like and like there's like something to that where if you're a design firm, you should not be designing uncomfortable clothes for your client. There's like a tailoring that has to go on, and this is why somebody I will always remember one of my early clients, when I first broke out, and there was the VP of marketing client side was actually like quite a kind of like a brand savant in a sense, and he actually went into like restaurant branding and whatnot. But what he told me, he said that a brand identity is not only for the public, it's for the internal team. It's for their morale. It's to give them something to unite around. It gives them something that feels like they can represents not like them. It like represents like what they're doing, and this kind of entity. It like gives them a flag to fight under, and that just stuck with me. And what I've noticed is that if whoever like the main person is, and the people around them that are responsible for kind of guiding them, can adopt the brand, whether it's video or audio language, whether it's the verbal language, whether it's the written language, or whether it's the visual language. That's what design is. Design is deliberateness in detail, and like whatever those details might be, and those details should be tailored, not just for the audience. It should be tailored for the people who they're representing.
Did Paul Rand deliver like an internal document to Apple when he designed their logo? I feel like maybe it was for Next. I don't know. He worked with some other French firm with Next, but I know that
he did not do documentation from what I can remember. Like he did not do these big elaborate design documents that became very popular.
It was just like, here's the logo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like sure that there was like some kind of presentation, but I mean,
yes.
We've like seen the dog and pony shows from some of these brand firms where it's just like, if a brand isn't easy to like get at in like just like a few slides, it's not strong enough. It's too complicated. Nobody's going to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I remember there was that internal Facebook booklet that was like kind of like the Facebook manifesto for internal use, and I know they hired a design firm to put together that, and that kind of gets at what you're talking about, which makes design sound like this kind of dark art, where
dark art or just like vapid, just like bloat. It's where it's like, okay, this is just kind of worthless foo-foo stuff. Which is why I think that I very quickly understood that being a design studio or being an advertising agency is not good enough. You need to be a consultancy, and it's focused on the entirety of the brand, and that means there's a business objective that is in your minds, because that's delivering value. It isn't delivering a product. It's delivering services that may manifest themselves in products. But you don't have to inflate the product in order to justify your firm's existence, or the type of money that I'm sure Facebook is spending on design.
Things like that.
Yeah.
What's the line? So you've talked about a lot of y'all's work has been with legacy brands, like legacy, old school, elite, conservative brands that you've updated. And I'm sure that the common criticism of a lot of those brands from people that aren't familiar with them would be on first blush that they're pretentious. And maybe this comes from the people that might not be concerned about these things as you and I are. But I mean, what would you say to someone who says that like good design indicates pretension?
Well, no, I would say that. First of all, I would say it's not. Then it's just not for you. I mean, that's I think what good design does. It self-selects, and if someone says, "Well, you're pretentious, you're elitist, you are overeducated," or whatever these various criticisms might be, I say, well, it's just not for you. You probably need to go down market, and kind of find something that is easier for you to grasp. Both, maybe it's just a reading comprehension issue, right? You can never separate the design from the editorial content when you're dealing with a publication. You will always have those things very tightly together. Working with something like the Claremont Institute, where you have this old school Claremont review of books, but then they have an idea that they want to do short form content. They want it to be punchier. They want to kind of do some like esoteric stuff that is going around on the internet. They want to talk about sort of these internet intellectual movements, and sort of be like a place to host those conversations. And so they then come to us and, okay, great. We'll add it on as a blog to Claremont Review of Books. And I'm like, no. This is like an entirely separate brand. You need to kind of keep these things separate because you're going to have different readerships. And that's how the American Mind was born, right? Where it's like a completely different publication, not a completely different website, a completely different identity, because it's, catering to a different reader, and it's like representing different people at the, Claremont Institute.
My intimate introduction to, and I think how I found out about you guys was through the American Mind, and that was my intimate introduction to the Claremont Institute. And I think I'd probably heard about the Claremont Institute, but I'd never been like a conscious reader of any kind. But it's funny that you say that, because I came across it, through Twitter. That American Mind did exactly what it was designed to do, which was get to, and it still does, maybe less so than it used to, but when it was like hitting on all cylinders, that's exactly the audience it was going after. It got to me. And it got me into, I subscribe to the Claremont Review of Books now. And yeah. I mean, that's like, I'm like the example of the guy that the funnel pulled me into there. Now I pay him.
That's literally how we drew it up.
Yeah.
And so, the criticism that something is going above your head. There was a recent conversation on Twitter, right, where it was, a publication that I'm on the board of, this I Am 1776. I'm sure you know them. Mm-hmm. People talking about the content. The content is talking about Nietzsche and Heidegger.
I know.
Should not be.
But that I know exactly who you're talking about, and I know exactly what they said, because it was. I mean, like I know the beef.
Like, look, like I don't really care for if there is any kind of like beef going on or like whatever. It was just simply, it just showed me that many people in the replies were either, one, they were saying like, this is good, what are you talking about? But it was also just saying like, this is just, it just came across. It isn't interesting. I mean, somebody that was like replying to me when I was like, I actually found this quite insightful. Somebody was saying, well, yeah, it's like interesting, but what does it do? It's like, okay, so now that you've read it, you actually can like get something out of it. And so many times we just need to give these things a chance. Things that seem dense. I mean, if you crack open a a new criterion, I mean, it's just like a solid wall
It's great.
of Galliard. But like
Yeah,
that thing
yeah.
is an education. That
Oh yeah.
and so it's like the same thing with these places like I Am 1776, right? It isn't a place to entertain you. It's a place to, in some ways, educate you, and maybe inspire you. And different publications can have different identities. You know, we all don't
Yes.
need to be competing one with the other. And I have to tell people this all the time that like rather than trying to be the sun, you need to try to be a star and find your place in the heavens, like in these various constellations. And some group together very well, but many times publications just need to find that place, stop
I'm
like the mimetic competition, and just get comfortable with who they are.
It's something that I think about constantly. And, you know, you fail or succeed at this, but like constantly what I'm thinking about is what our readers want to read or what they would like to hear about, this kind of thing. And you know, there's part of you that wants to write this or that and say this or that. And you know, I think some people may frame that as kind of like a decision of whether to tell the truth or untruth, because if you're not saying what you like really think or whatever the case is. But I'm constantly thinking about that. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's an ecosystem. Like everyone can play off one another. I guess if you're competing directly for revenue, then that's a whole other question. But I feel like the media space is so small, the one that we're talking about, and the like, what the size
Yeah.
of the industry is probably like not above 8 figures. So it's small. It's not like you're talking. It's not like you're a Rockefeller trying to conquer the the oil industry. But speaking of new criterion, I love that publication. I read it, and I recently read this like old piece they did about Rabelais, from the French writer back in like 1998. I actually read it on that trip that we were on together recently, and I don't know, you know, that's like one of those publications where they just have this archive of backlog material you can just comb back through.
Yeah.
And it's like an education unto itself. I didn't study the liberal arts or English, or I didn't get my master's in any of those things.
Same.
And so a good resource for me who's curious and inclined that way is to read, like, the New Criterion is a great resource for that. And I understand. So, like, and I'm not going to go out and talk to, like, my brothers, for example, would not want to hear me talk about Rabelais, you know? And I'm not stupid enough to try to tell them about Rabelais. We talk about different things.
But you also like wouldn't want the New Criterion commenting on like Monday Night Football, because you would be like, "Ew, what are you doing?" Because
correct.
It doesn't fit what
Yes.
they have established about themselves. It's like kind of disrespecting their own history, and that's what sounds. And to kind of pull this conversation back to like a you know, brand levels, right? It's like people join these places and they know that something's off, but they don't really value the past. They don't value what has made it successful, and so they then try to change it, right? Or they start something and they just try to be somebody else, right? They're like trying to kind of be the I compare it to the story in the Old Testament of when David is going out to fight Goliath. And Saul says, "Well, you're just a kid. Here, you need to wear my armor. So, like, that's what will make you, you know, worthy." And the armor doesn't fit, and David doesn't feel right in it. And he's like, "I won't be able to fight in this thing. And like, this is just not me." And he puts off the armor that like supposedly would protect him, that would help him succeed, but he puts it off because it's just not him. And it just doesn't fit him well. And so like we need to take those examples ourselves, and like whether we're taking over something or whether we're starting something and saying, what is me? What is my sweet spot? And yeah, like we're playing in a pretty small pool in these like weird kind of like internet circles, but there is still a place for people to do something unique. Sometimes that's just all that we are wanting. We're just wanting something a little bit different, something that's going to provide some modicum of
Everyone,
value.
yeah, everyone is seeking that, right? Like the online right. I don't know. There's so many terms bandied about. That's one that I use on this show. It's the online right. The online right seems like kind of desperate for like cultural cachet in some regard. I don't know that it's like status, but they want something impressive that represents them well. And aside from various accounts online that I think do a fairly good job of that, one thing like a trend that's kind of emerged recently is this like kind of collection of products like I guess Hestia cigarettes is like an example of this. And we just kind of set the polls of very badly designed things being indicative of the right wing traditionally, and then you have the new criterion, the conservative, old school conservative elite being on the other end of that. But it does seem like there's emerging kind of a middle section, which is more consumer oriented, maybe in the way that I would describe the way that Apple and traditional consumer facing companies are oriented. Like what kind of trends or developments do you see there that are interesting?
Yeah, it's very easy to get hyped up about things that are very like edgy. I mean, there's a fashion designer who is doing a whole fashion show called The Longhouse, and she was inspired by Lomez's article in First Things. So like, first of all, to just say that a guy, Lomez, published an article called The Longhouse, or What is the Longhouse, or whatever, in First Things. I just never thought that I would be uttering such words, and so it's exciting times for me. Yeah.
For people that don't understand that, Lomez Lomez is an anonymous internet or Twitter account that is in charge of the Passage Prize, which is worth looking up if you're not familiar. And the Longhouse is a concept popularized by Bronze Age Pervert in his book that describes kind of the hyper feminized. I mean, like people bicker about what the Longhouse actually is, and like I think like BAP's operating definition is that it's an actual place. That's what he said repeatedly. It's an actual place. So I'm not going to get into the semantics of what it means, but for as best as I can summarize it, it's a description of the way that women keep young men down, and kind of reduce their vitality. It's like the school marm and the schoolhouse situation. Like the elementary school, especially the public elementary school, is the Longhouse, and then First Things is like this legacy, old school, traditional Catholic publication. So
well, it is not technically Catholic. I must defend my own clients and say that it is meant to be ecumenical in the sense of mainly evangelicals and Catholics kind of bonding over like shared concerns in the public square. That's the original mission. And so yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to.
Oh no! But yeah, that's actually great context because it just shows you how weird things are getting.
Yes.
And just at how you're like, okay, this is a client where like, okay, like, but then you know what? Then like seeing people on the internet, like just like random, like internet accounts reposting things from the new criterion from 1998 and saying this is great, or like talking about like philosophy and theology and like looking at classical architecture and things from the past in ways where again this was all the domain of the conservative movement, of the intellectual conservative movement. It was an elite thing, and so to now see this kind of go both ways. I would say that that's kind of what like where we're at the intersection of, and I kind of like I really mean the firm is seeing this exchange take place where you have the old stodgy academics need to give some room to the young punks on the internet who don't have all the degrees or whatnot, but maybe they have ideas, maybe they're onto something in certain quarters, but then also these younger people realizing that there are institutions here that are quite knowledgeable. They've been saying these things for a long time,
right.
And you just don't know about them.
Yeah.
But now that you do, like participate in this thing rather and like try to like grow it out rather than like contend for like the scraps. And so yeah, like that like middle ground, like you were talking about, is just beginning to expand. Like more people are kind of entering that sphere, and that's not talking about this broader like commercial cultural movement where we're seeing clients who they've like read our various publication clients, or like know of some like think tank that we or like some like book or author that we did PR for, and they're like, yeah, we want you to now do work for our aerospace engineering company or for our private equity firm, because there's a cultural alignment that they see as being very important. Many times because they've been burned, or because they just cannot trust the kind of like run-of-the-mill consultancy or marketing agency to show the attention to detail that we show, and that like being able to kind of split hairs and then take little snippets and facets of their identity and of their company, and turn it into things that they can grow with, things that we can market.
I mean, branding communicates something that words cannot, as you were saying. And it's interesting what you just said about companies outside of kind of the explicitly political realm approaching you. I'm wondering what you see. Do you see like a future where design kind of fragments off into these two very distinct camps, or is there already that kind of divide going on right now where you can tell immediately what a company that's building your pin, I don't know, your pin, or do you see what I'm saying? Like, is there a future where we have literally parallel apps for everything that are just slightly different branded? Like, it feels like that's true social for Twitter or whatever.
I certainly hope not. I think that there's actually value in certain things in society being big. I think places where we communicate with each other, they should be big. I think that there's certain efficiencies, and now I'm going to sound like a neoliberal. But by the way, like I don't like consider myself even conservative. Many people would not consider me conservative. I don't consider myself progressive or liberal either. I don't really know what I am.
I just don't like the conservative label because it's associated with defeat.
Well, I mean, and it's associated with something that I know is not even the truth of the term. Like I've been saying, it's just not the Daily Wire. It's a National Review, and so I mean, all right. So like my point is, I hope that certain things stay the same in terms of like their model. I believe other things need to separate. I think we actually need some distance. I think there needs to be more competition. If you're talking about aesthetic movements, if you were talking about just how things look, I mean, NBC News kind of picked up on the design of the American mind. So, there's like these like really weird overlaps that I've seen, foreign affairs, or like these like various publications. I like see them take and like borrow stuff from like things that I designed years ago all the time. And that I like, no, there is a direct overlap here. And that's just part of what makes the visual arts beautiful, is that people can be inspired by things, even if it's by people who aren't ideologically aligned with them. For like me to see like interior design is actually like a huge white pill for me, because people are valuing old things, because people are valuing like color again, but like classical color, like things that don't pop, but like things that give you peace, that things that are pleasing to the eye. And look, like I love a good minimalist all white house, but like that's not for everybody. Not everybody can pull that off. And so for the most part, you need things where people feel like they are improving their surroundings, and that could be their physical surroundings, it could be their digital surroundings.
Yep.
where like we need to surround ourselves with things that are good and that are beautiful and that we can also like feel their uniqueness, which of course is a danger with the digital, is that everything starts to look the same, everything becomes flat, everything becomes two dimensional. But like that's where I hope that like design and the arts can actually be, where like these lines can be blurred. I mean, for like me to see, people begin to enter this space of branding, of design, of marketing, of consulting over how you look and feel and sound, who are not necessarily conservative, but who they will at least just do their best for a more culturally conservative group of people. I mean, that's like good news for I mean, that's all that I ever wanted my company to do, was to just give people services that would help them succeed. And the fact that there's good ideas, and the fact that there's education, and the fact that there is civilization that is kind of coming from the right, and that is in these various ways infiltrating the center, or like the center left, because they can just see for themselves, like, I don't want to live in a prison cell with IKEA furniture. I think I'll go antiquing and I'll paint my wall forest green, and then so like you and
that's
I don't
actually
care.
that's called Belmead Green. Actually, Belmead being a neighborhood around here, and but I think the only reason.
Yeah, well, that also looks like British racing green. So sorry, Jaguar got there first. And yeah.
Hey, yeah. Oh, well. I mean, you want to talk about the XJ6 or the XJ12? We can talk about that all day.
I mean, I don't really want to talk about any like new Jaguar stuff. I mean, they're just killing me with this whole new design. We're gonna go in like a brutalist design direction. Like, so you're gonna just throw out all of your legacy.
I loved the S-Type. And the what was it? The S-Type in the 90s when I was growing up as like a second grader. I loved the Jaguar S-Type for some reason. And I look back at it now, and I'm not really sure, it's not as attractive to me as it was as a kid. But I used to think the Jaguar S-Type was like the pinnacle of car design when I was probably in second, third grade.
I mean, it's like a truly like weird supercar, and I think it was one of those things where it's like, Jaguar kind of had to be a part of its like crew. I mean, I liked kind of like the Princess Diana car in like the 80s, that XK, which had like the V12. I mean, because it was like in the 80s, but it just still looked like it was something from the decades past. And it had almost like a muscular look and feel to it, which they kind of revived with the XF, which is what I have.
Yeah, sorry. Are you talking about the XJ? Yeah,
No. Go to it would be the XK, I think.
XK.
Yeah.
Or the XJS. Yeah.
XJS. Sorry.
There's that nice forest green you're talking about.
Yes.
I could look at pictures of Jaguars, old 70s, 60s, 70s Jaguars all day. I guess that's like in the 80s. What year is that? Anyway, I'm derailing us. What I was going to say is that I think one of the things that attuned me to aesthetics, I come from a family of interior designers, women in my family. And my sister's an interior designer. My mom, not professionally one like my sister, but, I grew up in houses well looked after by the women in the family and took care of them. And I think if you went into any of our houses, then you would be able to tell you'd probably be able to guess what our politics are. And it's not because there's like a thing on the wall that's like, some quote, like needle point quote, but just, appreciation for old things, I think is a generally kind of
conservative.
Yeah, tendency.
Yeah, but it's also
traditional, maybe is a better word.
Yeah, right. But like no, like part of what you're saying is like the appreciation for old things. Liberals love old things. Liberals are part of historic societies. I mean, New York, the only reason why it is the way it is because you had the liberals defending things like Grand Central Station, so that it like wouldn't befall Penn, like what happened with Penn Station. And liberals deep down want nice things, and they want comfortable things, and they want things that make them feel good, and they want things that they can value and that make them feel valuable. There's nothing wrong with that. And so what like modernism and what progressivism has kind of pushed is that, I mean, like, let's just, back to my point, right? About like, hey, you can actually like, if you have traditional art in your home, if you have like velvet couches, if you have like gilded picture frames, that makes you, a coded racist. You are supporting white supremacy with this because that's somehow like a European aesthetic. It's like, well, what if the European aesthetic is conducive for good living? I mean, what if that's what it is? And what if that's just what people like? Because I don't know, maybe they're European and they just kind of want that. I mean, most liberals want to live in older buildings that are well lit, that are well laid out. They buy either new furniture that looks like old furniture, new clothes that look like old clothes. They like vintage cars. Like these are just all things that are like unifying. They're unifying because they're just objectively good and nice. And I would hate for those things to become like things that the right wing say these are our things, because no, those are everybody's things. Those should work for everybody. And like the destruction of these things or the like coding them to be right wing and look, like I could kind of there's a lot to say about this.
There's
just a whole lot there because they like people are coming for aesthetics on the right.
They're coming for aesthetics, and I think like you could even talk about movies and kind of some of the recent attempts that have picked up and actually had some success to market explicitly conservative right-wing movies. And
versus just like Tom Cruise movies, which is just like so like right-wing traditional coded for years.
Yes.
And no one caught up on it. Nobody picked up on it. Tommy just slid right under the radar. And he just made movies that everyone wanted to see. And then all of a sudden you realize like this is a metaphor for the Longhouse. Or I'm just saying like there's
I mean, look, there's so many ways to read. I think one of the more interesting things about Twitter is the variety of interpretations of movies that you see pop up on there, and people kind of reinventing movies. Like Dead Poet Society, for example, was written by Tom Schulman, who went to my high school and wrote it kind of about the high school that I went to.
Yeah, and
it was not a boarding school, but he reframed it as a boarding school, talking about this particular teacher he had, Sam Pickering. And like, growing up, that movie was just kind of iconic around here in Nashville, especially for people that went to the school and were like, oh yeah, knowledge and unbounded learning and poetry, etc. And then I saw William Wheelwright did this interpretation of it where he talked about how the movie was just basically to like really briefly sum up his argument. It says libtarded because the teacher is teaching this like boundless understanding of literature and that you self-interpret it and that there's no tradition to inherit from. It's whatever it means to you. And
he isn't wrong in that like that's like something, I mean, like C.S. Lewis wrote explicitly against that.
Yes.
But then right, it's just like hard to enjoy things now when you're on Twitter and you realize, oh snap. But of course, like Twitter is also one of those things too, where like I just look back and then see people coming to the realizations like rap music is demonic. All of these movies make you a liberal, and then I'm just like my evangelical parents, like my Christian fundamentalist. Which I mean, like really, like when I like look back, like my parents were not fundamentalist.
Yeah,
by like what they were called, they would be considered by many people to be fundamentalists. But like they were just like, oh no, like that stuff doesn't feel right. No, like, that stuff feels awful. And then you like have like, you know, Kanye West saying like, you know, rap music's demonic, you know, and you're like, oh snap.
My parents were right. If I learned anything about them, and we both work in media, and I'm constantly thinking about media, and I've chosen to pursue media in all its forms as my career. And like one thing I constantly think about is how I was raised to approach media. My parents wouldn't let us watch They wouldn't even let us watch Power Rangers.
Nope.
They wouldn't let me watch. Well, it got loose as I was the oldest, and I was like the guinea pig. I couldn't watch Nickelodeon, which thank God I could not watch that. I could watch some Disney shows. I couldn't watch like Power Rangers, stuff like that. And you know, I think that people listening,
my parents literally said that Disney movies like groomed children sexually, like,
and they were right.
And they're dead.
I mean, did you ever? Okay, there was this movie called 13 that I'll never forget, and I think it's about this boy who becomes it's like a metaphor for going through puberty, and it's about this boy who becomes like a mermaid, basically.
The
and it's
13th
kind of this,
year.
No, it's just called.
Okay, yeah. I only know this because I'm like Googling it, not because I actually know this movie, because I didn't watch Disney movies growing up.
Yes, this is the one, but it looks so different. But yeah, this kid. He like gets scales, and you know, like I think my parents were a little naive about that one, but you know, I don't know. I think. There's a line, of course, but more importantly, less specifically about what I was and was not allowed to watch, was they engendered in me a consciousness of things that went into my brain and that those things would affect me. And that's one of the more valuable lessons that I learned growing up, was understanding that what I put into my head is going to come out in my life, and it'll express itself into my life. And I think that that's a lesson that is just, it's like a combination of media literacy and just understanding how things influence you.
Totally.
And I think that, you know, I don't know, it was the most valuable thing that I've learned. And maybe that understanding is what got me interested in media in the first place. But I do feel like, I don't know, it's good. It's a good thing to be conscious about what you put in your head. Yeah. You don't have to watch the demonic music video and be like, this is fine. You can say, no, that's clearly like, even if they're not being serious about it, they're playing with symbolism and things that are deliberately subversive, and they might not even know the tools that they're playing with, but they're casting a spell recklessly. Anyway,
this is how my parents described what discernment was. They said discernment is one of the senses, but is it sight? No. Is it taste? No. Is it touch? No. It's smell. Something smells off. Now, if something smells off, do you put it in your mouth and like eat it? No, you say, yeah, screw that. You know, I'm not going to eat that. If it you know, like so like that's what discernment has to be. Like we don't know all the different things that we are awakening, to kind of use the, you know, spiritual metaphor. Correct. And like, you know, some people just like think that it's harmless. Oh, it's just harmless fun. But someone who has discernment is able to say, that doesn't seem harmless. Yes. Something smells off with this. And I can't even explain it to you, but I'm not going to do it. And neither are my kids. And then later on, things start to come out. And then the kids say, thank God for my parents who had discernment and who had the courage to risk me like resenting them, or like risk me going or like risk their, you know, friends trying to shame them or whatever, to like hold me to some freaking standards. And like that's just all that my parents did. They held themselves to certain standards and they tried to instill those on me using discernment. And like sometimes do they succeed at everything? No. But like they also do succeed at a ton of stuff that if I had done whatever I wanted and like didn't have parents looking out for me, I would have been seriously screwed up.
The smell test is a really good way to describe it. And something came up recently, like someone was asking me if I was going to watch. I mean, this happens all the time where people are like, are you going to watch this or that? And like a lot of times it's the smell test. No, I'm not going to give that any time. Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to describe it. The smell test.
Well,
I was
people like have the smell test more than they even acknowledge, and that's really what we're talking about with these with like brands, with aesthetics, with like
Yes.
marketing. They know something is off. I've like taught
full circle.
yeah.
Circle.
I always do this because I always introduce rabbit trails, and I just feel like I just need to always get us
Dude,
back on the main path.
that was perfect right
Oh,
there.
thank
Because
you,
we're
thank
talking
you.
the smell test with branding, and that's where we started. That's
Yeah, I mean that's what we like call it taste, but oftentimes it isn't so much taste as it is smell, because we're
Yes.
not actually like eating something. We're just kind of getting a whiff of it and saying,
deciding if you want to eat it.
yeah.
Okay, so I mentioned we're coming up on an hour here, and I don't want to keep you up till midnight or past your bedtime. So I mentioned that we have some. I put some brands up, and I kind of thought it'd be fun to go kind of trace the history of
Sure.
brands. So we've got here Taco Bell, and
Okay,
Taco
now
Bell.
you tell me though for this one. Tell me, like, out of these, what is the best? Just like right off the top, just by just looking at it here.
Well,
knee-jerk
I
reaction.
like the 1985 one.
Correct. That is the correct answer. Now, like, then think about
because
why.
I've thought. Well, okay, I'm glad you asked me this about this one, because I've thought a lot about the Taco Bell logo for some reason.
I think about Taco Bell all the time because I eat Taco Bell all the time. So yeah.
I don't eat Taco Bell. Not anymore. But the one thing that's interesting about this is that Taco Bells are associated with the Southwest desert climates, and 1985 Taco Bell logo captures that better than even the kind of Mexican inflected 1962 logo. Yeah. And it captures the environment better. And then when you get to 1992, you can tell that they've kind of embraced their identity as this kind of like late night after dark spot. And then 94 is like the pinnacle of that identity. What I can't figure out is what they're thinking about with this new logo. I mean, first of all, that that faded purple thing up there, like what? Well, sorry, you can't see my mouse, but what is that?
Yeah,
what is that doing up there?
Dude, I don't try to explain or even criticize other like graphic identities anymore. I see it as temporary. All these graphic design like overhauls where they're just massive, making these huge pivots, I say temporary. The fact that Taco Bell has like survived for this long on their current brand identity is remarkable. But I expect for them to make a throwback to the 80s any day now, because
you know what's interesting about that? I saw someone apparently Slack's about to go through an aggressive redesign, and someone responded to that with, anytime your UI UX designers come to you with a redesign proposal, you fire them.
Yeah.
because that's when you're reaching the point where the designers have nothing to do.
Yeah. Yeah, like I don't see anything very different from 94 to now. It's arbitrary. It's the same identity. It's like the same thing. And of course, yes, it's an evolution. It's like updating. It's updating to modern trends.
But
for
it looks,
an older audience.
It looks awful.
But no, it's not. It just looks awful. It just looks like there's just no everything about Taco Bell is like kind of like a meme, and it's like they used to really embrace that in their advertising, and it was like wild and it was like fun, and that's like why you go to a Taco Bell. You like go because it's this like, I mean, first of all, it tastes great. And first of all, I don't want to hear any judgments from you on this. Taco Bell is great. If you don't like Taco Bell, you're just not American. And frankly, I doubt if you're a straight white male. But yes, now it's like it's just like arbitrary changes to make it clean. Like Taco Bell's not about clean, man. Like yeah. So anyway.
I've seen it reflected in their dining room design too. I can't go into the dining room anymore. It's like
I am now a drive-through man. Yep.
Yeah, I'm only drive-through. I remember when you could go into a fast food place and it feel mildly hospitable. I feel like you go into them now and it feels like a doctor's office. Like it was not always like that. It was not always like that.
But like they're also all the same. You literally
Yes.
cannot. I mean, tell me the difference between a Taco Bell and Chick-fil-A.
Well, I mean, that might be the two things on the polar opposite end of the
No,
spectrum.
no, no, no. Tell me, like in the dining room design, what that you know is unique
Well,
about
Chick-fil-A
Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A is packed, unlike Taco Bell, like on a Tuesday.
It actually has people in it. True, true.
Yes.
Okay.
I
Like,
can't
what,
comment
what
on
about
anything.
the design? See, like even Chick-fil-A is guilty of this.
Yes, yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So like, yeah.
I mean, you remember the old Wendy's dining rooms?
Oh,
it was like
great.
this, like wooden benches. It was
it's
like this kind of
fantastic.
like, oh yeah, you go in those things now. Again, it feels like it's the same thing as Taco Bell. But
Anywhere
why would they destroy that? Like, I used to love going in there. And like pulling
Because
into
it was
there
meant
was
to
nothing
be
like
Southern.
pulling. Yeah, there was nothing like pulling into a small town Wendy's
Yep.
and going into it, and it felt like it was like your grandma's kitchen. And now they like made it into this like blob.
Nobody likes whimsy anymore. Like anyone who is in like corporate design, they dislike whimsy because it infringes upon their identity. Do you remember what I was telling you about how like graphic identities are like the expression of the people inside, and they can't, like, if they see themselves as metropolitan and as urbane and educated, and they all come from these from I'm smart. This looks like it's for commoners. This looks like it's for yokels. This looks like it is for people. See, Bud Light gets a lot of hate, but people have been Bud Lighting things for 15 years. And like we can like go. I'm sure there's plenty of other examples
I've got
show this. But yeah,
I've got a friend who's a comedian who once told me that the only people that are good in impersonating, Trump or whoever is the first step to being good at impersonating someone is that you actually have to like them, and you can't adequately and effectively impersonate them or inhabit their mindset until you actually like them.
But like but I don't like. I like to me. I think you have to either like them or hate them. But of course, there would some who would argue that that's like the same thing. It's you're just getting into them, right? That's like your point, right?
Let's not derail this again. But
Okay,
I see
fine.
your point. We're gonna go to Burberry now. What's interesting about Burberry is that they changed in 2018 to this fairly, like just sans serif font, totally characterless. I'm sure you're going to have an opinion on this that's distinct from mine. But they switched back to an older looking typeface for their logo.
Well,
so I'm
like
curious
what they don't have here, they don't have the horse, but the horse is now part of the logo once more. They don't have it here, but they have this knight that was the identity for 100 years.
Yes,
Over 100. I mean, think about that. You have the gall. You have the hubris. You have the unrestrained pride to think that you can do away with 100-year-old identity. This thing, like, so like to me, this is someone who doesn't like the brand. Okay, see, this
that's the new one.
It.
Okay,
this is it.
Yeah.
So it's like kind of like it's like kind of dishonest for 1,000 logos or whatever that site is to not have it, because it's a huge L for Burberry and for the designer who thought that they could just make this, and it's like, no, actually, people like old things. The oldness of it, the legacy of it, is what gives it its value. It's what gives it its luxury.
Of course, yeah. It's the brand.
It's what makes it English. People want to feel like they are English and British when they wear Burberry.
And they urbanized it with their sans serif.
Well, it isn't even just urbanizing it; it's American urbanizing it. It's like making it something where it's like, oh, okay, look, like, love New York. I'm from New York. Not every city has the same identity as New York. Neither can they have that identity. And so like people kind of like, want to be the thing that is most successful right now, rather than taking a look at what has made them successful up until this point and say, that's what we have to double down on.
I like that they brought the horse back. I love the horse. I have
Look
this.
at how beautiful that horse is. What a
Yeah.
beautiful horse.
I mean, I have a Burberry bomber, linen bomber. It was
Beautiful.
probably made in the 80s, and it has this logo in it. And like
Yeah.
it says Burberry's instead of Burberry. And for a while, I didn't understand that they had changed from Burberry's, and so when I was trying to figure it out anyway.
Yeah,
Little side
no.
quest.
Yeah, like you, of course, because you're a rich kid, you could wear Burberry, and I had to wear London Fog, which is like discount Burberry.
I did not grow up wearing Burberry. Don't get me wrong. My parents
Okay.
we're like southern, oldish money, and so like southern old money doesn't spend money on stuff
No.
like this. I got this when I was a pretentious 25-year-old.
Oh, there we go.
And I wanted to look like hot shit. So
There it
anyway.
is. No, good. Yeah, no, like I remember, yeah, that's just like what it was. Like you like want that look because you want to look like you're kind of like preppy British, and like nah, you're gonna have to wear London Fog from Burlington Coat Factory.
Well, I'm wearing like Bonobos and J. Crew right now.
Oh,
So,
really? Well, okay.
yeah.
I am. I'm going to embarrass myself with this, but yeah, I'm wearing Rag and Bone and Lacoste. So,
Oh, dude, you were just lecturing me about wearing Burberry. Look at you.
Well,
Rag
like-
and Bone. I can't think of every Rag and Bone garment I bought has fallen apart in a week.
yeah, this one probably will too. But it's if it's on sale and it just kind of like goes with whatever the vibe, I'm a sucker for it.
Hey, so I'm gonna sidebar us here for 1 second because I tell everyone about this guy that makes the best pants in the world, in my opinion, Jack Donnelly.
Yeah, sure.
You should get. Do you know this guy?
Yep.
Are you familiar? Oh man, amazing! I bet 90%. Well, not 90%. A significant portion of my pants are his, and he does these small batch pants.
Great.
And they also have a long rise, so they sit like a pant should, which is not on the hips but at the waist. And yeah. Anyway, very good pants.
Without getting into my anatomy, like the very long rise does not suit my posterior well.
You mid rise.
I actually do quite a bit of low rise. So yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So the Kooples and Todd Snyder are kind of my go-tos for pants.
Huh. Hold on. I don't want to show like an ass picture, but it's just. But yeah, look. See, those sit like on the waist.
Yeah. I mean, I've got some pants like that, whether it's like Belstaff or whatnot. But
all right. So anyway, enough about
pants
what we're wearing. Yeah. So look, this is NBC. This is an interesting history here, and I only put this one up because you were talking about them aping American mind. But what's the peacock is kind of the preeminent symbol here. What's interesting, I haven't investigated this one, but they basically went back in 2022 to the 2000, the old logo after doing this kind of like faux 3D thing, which is very early internet.
yeah, that's all just like trend chasing. I wouldn't even call that like redesigns necessarily. To me, the real move, right, was in 86 when they decide like we're going back to the fifth, we're going back to 56, as in like there is this very like and like if I'm not mistaken, was it
Saul Bass?
Saul Bass, there we go. So see, Saul Bass like was like perceptive enough to say you need to like take whatever your peak was and then just stay there, stay at the peak, because that's what rests in people's minds. And like, for instance, I love that like NBC look that's on that second row on the right. That just like appeals to my typographer's itch that I just love to scratch. But knowing that, going to and like saying like this is, if like this zenith of the brand was in that time period there, where there's the peacock. Okay, take that you can, update it. There's some things that just don't really work well. And that logo has stood the test of time. They have they have 3D'd it, and they've changed the typography maybe, but that, just one of the truly great graphic identities. I only wish that they had a visual identity, the rest of their scheme. I wish it just captured that same type of vibrance. I would say, but
I don't think
that's neither here nor there.
I don't think it was Saul Bass. Saul Bass did CBS, or no, that was William Golden. Saul Bass did Warner Brothers. Hold on, I got Saul Bass's logos up here.
No. It's one of the. I don't know if it was Paul Rand who designed it.
Fred Knapp, no.
Oh no. Okay, so in '56, so this actually from Adobe. Okay, so it was an in-house job. John Graham was their in-house design director in the '50s who did that. The resurgence of it, though, was a Tremeoff and Geismar logo. Let me just make sure, see if we can get the name of the actual designer. But yeah, Tremeoff and Geismar is like a famous firm, old firm that's still in operation.
All right. Well, Andrew, this was a fruitful and productive conversation as always. I'm gonna
Really
pull up
enjoyed it.
I'm gonna pull up. That's not the website. I'm gonna pull up Beck and Stone's website for everyone so they can see y'all's excellent website. Like I said, the Pamphleteer was designed by Beck and Stone. I reached out to them because of y'all's work on the American Mind, as we were talking about earlier. And they do a lot of great work. If you're looking for brand design, I can't suggest anyone else, frankly, because I haven't worked with anyone else. So, but Andrew, thanks.
We were your
thanks.
first.
Well, the first is always the best, right?
That's right.
And thanks for coming on. I'm sure we'll talk soon. I'm going to stop the recording and then we can say a proper goodbye.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.